This live stream brought to you by the Excelsior Citizen and these generous sponsors. The Simmons Sales Team, your hometown realtors. Find out how you can advertise with Excelsior Springs' #1 community resource. Visit ExcelsiorCitizen.com today.
You know what I mean? Come on.
Guess what I saw on Liberty today?
Melissa,
I was
coming.
I didn't see what you had.
I don't have any update on it, but I mean, I just can't imagine they can stay closed after, you know. I mean, they're virtual.
I go by what's on my mind.
Yeah, that's all I've heard. So.
Yeah, there's only so many because I have to quarantine for 2 weeks. All right, we're going to call the meeting to order. This time I'd entertain we're going to amend the agenda. It's been a long Monday. We're going to add a item G2A, board discussion of board vacancy. Having amended the agenda, I'd entertain a motion to adopt.
So moved.
First by Troy, second by Rick. All those in favor? And that passes 6-0. If you'll please join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. This time I'd entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda. First by Darren, second by Kaylin. All those in favor? And that passes 6-0. Moving on to recognition. Dr. Tomlinson, classified employee, please.
Pleased the board, I'd like to recognize this month's Classified Employee of the Month, Valerie Allenbrand. Miss Allenbrand couldn't be here this evening. She had a baseball game with her grandkids, but she was nominated by Dr. Hux. And Dr. Hux said that each Friday, without fail, Val organizes lunch for anyone in the central office who wants to participate. She not only collects the money, the orders, she even goes and picks up the food for the staff. The result is a weekly event where central office staff come together and enjoy a meal along with good conversation. The significance of the effort is a strong camaraderie among CO staff. I often brag to other superintendents about this, and there's always an astonished look on their faces. What Val does is just another reason I'm lucky to work at Excelsior Springs School District, and we wanted to recognize all the things that Valerie Allenbrand does for the district. So thank you to her.
Just in case she's watching.
Yeah.
All right, next up, some of our mid-year retirement.
Pleased the board, I'm going to recognize, I see a couple of people here in the audience. I'm going to come back to them actually, save you from coming all the way up here. Would that be okay? So I've got Anita Tucker and Art Moyer. So if you guys would stand here for a second. I'm trying to keep your family to go all the way up there. Is that nicer?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So we have some pieces of our appreciation for all the service and years you've given to the staff and the students here at Excelsior Springs. And you might explain to everybody your position that you had and how many years you were here at Excelsior Springs.
I was a school crossing guard, and I worked for the school for 20 years, and then for 4 years of the police department before I switched over to the school.
Awesome.
As a custodian, and been here 5 years.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. We really appreciate you. You have some goodies in there, and we will let you know if you ever need anything. Feel free to stay in touch with us. You'll buy activity guys to come up and participate
right. Our last recognition is our outgoing school board member.
I ask Dr. Howe to come join us, please, if you don't mind, sir. I don't have to explain this to the board because they understand some of the sacrifices that we give as school board members. But Dr. Howe has been on the school board for the last 11 years and has dedicated a large portion of his life to the citizens, but most importantly the students of Excelsior Springs, and it's something that's very appreciated by not only the people within the district, but also the other board members. And we really thank you so much for everything you've done for us and the support you've given us. I'm happy to announce that Dr. House actually joined our school district. He's going to be a science teacher at the high school starting next year, and we couldn't be more excited to welcome you to another aspect of our family. So thank you so much for everything you've done. This is a small appreciation of what you've given us the last 11 years. Thank you very much.
Speech. It's been my honor to actually work with all of you, and my pleasure, and keep up the good work. I mean, we have gotten some really neat positive things going on with our school district, and we just need to keep the momentum going forward. So I'm just kind of switching hats, and I'm going a little bit of a different direction, but I'm still going to be serving for this district. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Hey, Stephen, you want to introduce the video?
If you would like to watch the SBA.
Roll that beautiful bean footage.
All right, June 22 board report video. Darren, there it is. Right on cue. No visitors, right, Lisa?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MSBA Board Report for the month of June. We thank you for the opportunity to share some news and information during a few minutes of your board meeting. We begin with a look at the recently concluded 2022 regular session of the Missouri General Assembly. Despite some proposed legislation that could have been detrimental to school boards and public schools, there were some significant positives, including a substantial increase in student transportation funding. It will be the first time since 1991 that the state's share of student transportation is fully funded. MSBA's Director of Governmental Relations, Grant Shields, tells us several bills aimed at school boards did not cross the finish line this year.
We worked on a lot of issues this year, specifically regarding school board member recall, moving school board member elections to November, and making school boards run on partisan tickets. You know, there was some momentum out there, but really I think we got our message across that Missourians don't need more partisan politics involved in their school board elections. And I think we were very successful in getting that message across.
Shields says an education omnibus bill with more than 30 provisions, including changes to the way literacy is taught, and support for what's known as competency-based education was passed by the General Assembly. We will be providing you with more details on all the provisions of that bill. Shields says now that the session is over, it's still important for board members and administrators to stay in touch with legislators and candidates for the legislature during this election year.
Absolutely. I believe that our school board members definitely need to get involved with those who are running for office, because those who are running to represent you in Jefferson City need to know what the concerns and the issues that are going on in your community are. And the best way to find that out is through our school system. Schools are the heartbeats of our communities, and you all are their elected leaders. So please reach out to those who are running for office and get to know them, because when it comes time next year when they're voting on important public education bills, they'll have a relationship with you, and you'll be able to talk to them about how those issues could affect districts in their hometown.
Shields says the advocacy work of school board members paid significant dividends during this year's legislative session. The legislature did address the issue of teacher pay this year by approving Governor Parsons' recommendation to increase the baseline teacher salary from $25,000 to $38,000 a year through a matching grant program. Under the program, the state would provide local school districts with 70% of the salary costs needed to meet the new minimum starting salary, and local school districts would provide the remaining 30%. While that plan may be helpful to some school districts in the state, much more is needed to improve Missouri's low teacher salaries and help attract and retain teachers in our public schools. MSBA's immediate past president, Linda Doherty, says Missouri needs a sustainable plan for raising teacher salaries across the board.
Our state is facing a teaching shortage, and it will only continue to grow in the future if we do not find practical, sustainable solutions to increase pay for well-deserving teachers. Education is critical to the health of our communities. Teachers train and equip our students with the skills they need to enter the workforce. The workforce availability drives economic development within our state and creates jobs within our communities, which ultimately affects the quality of life for each of our students and families.
Doherty is the president of the Nixa Board of Education that recently passed a resolution urging the state to partner with Missouri's public schools to have the revenue needed to provide long-term sustained salaries for all teachers. A Blue Ribbon Commission established by the State Board of Education, charged with developing recommendations to address teacher recruitment and retention challenges in Missouri, is beginning its work this month. MSBA past president Rhonda Gilstrap of Blue Springs is a member of that Blue Ribbon Commission. MSBA's positions on state and federal education issues are determined by the Delegate Assembly that will be meeting this coming November. If your school board has a position statement on an issue you would like to submit to the Advocacy Committee for consideration, you can do so this summer. The Advocacy Committee reviews those proposals and makes recommendations to the Delegate Assembly that determines MSBA's positions on issues. Make your plans now to attend the 2022 MSBA Annual Conference in cooperation with the Missouri Association of School Administrators, to be held November 3rd through 6th in Kansas City. The event will once again feature some outstanding general session speakers, along with a wide variety of concurrent sessions, many presented by school leaders from districts throughout the state. Registration information for the conference will be posted on the MSBA website. And don't forget the 2022 Safe Schools and Colleges Forum, sponsored by MSBA's Center for Education Safety, will be held this year on November 3rd in conjunction with the annual conference in Kansas City. Past and present members of local school boards can be nominated for the 2022 Paul Morris Community Service Award. This award is for those who have shown an outstanding commitment to local community service. Nominations will be accepted through Friday, July 1st, and the award will be presented at the MSBA Annual Conference. That's it for this month's edition of the MSBA Board Report. Thanks for allowing us to have some time at your board meeting, and so long from Columbia.
Anything further, Darren?
Yeah, as he was talking about the annual conference, November 4th and 5th, it's in Kansas City again this year. So we have a social room that it was for us only. So obviously we're not gonna be, staying in a hotel or anything like that, because it's in our backyard. We are all registered for the conference. If anything like that changes, just talk to Lisa. And that should be it.
All right. Thank you very much. We have no visitors this evening, so we'll move on to Superintendent's Report. Dr. Hooks.
Two quick items here. First one's the monthly enrollment update. The enrollment ending was similar to last year, but about 30 students better than last year. So that was good to see that. So just wanted you to have that. And then the other update was the legislative update. Luckily, the MSBA report went through some of that, so I don't have to spend as much time on it. But as was mentioned, hasn't been since 1991 that transportation's been fully funded. For this district, that's around $500,000 more dollars. So that was a good thing to see. Disappointingly, though, no additional money was applied to the foundation formula, even though their record revenue at the state. So
and that transportation thing's just for this year?
It's just for a year, yes, sir. There was a charter funding virtual instruction expansion bill that passed, waiting governor's signature by Doug Ritchie. Two aspects on that. one of the big pieces to note there is basically what it does is allow local funding, essentially like the state foundation formula funding, to be used to fund charter schools. So when we think of a pie of money, some of those funds that would have normally gone to public schools will now go to these charter schools. And so if you're a public school, you don't like that because that's less funds for us. But how much it will be, it's yet to be seen. It could be nominal. The other aspect, which is a positive on the virtual instruction, is the accountability measure that was added. I do appreciate that the conversations I have with Representative Ritchie, and in this we had discussed, and it made it into the bill, which is an accountability for those virtual learning sites. The student will now belong to that site, and they will be held accountable for their success, not us, our district. We will no longer be held account to that. So I thought that was really important to note. I also mentioned that large omnibus bill with 30 or so amendments, if you will, squished together. And the reading piece is a piece we're going to have to find out more about. And for the most part, that's it for the legislation.
All right. Any questions for Dr. Hux on excuse me. All right. Thank you, sir. Moving on to discussion items. First up, student services. Dr. Cruz.
Yes. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for a few minutes just to chat with you a little bit about student services. I know it's been a while since I've brought an update to you all, and nothing to vote on or anything like that tonight. Just wanted to share a little bit about the exciting things that are happening in student services with the close of this year going into next year. So first of all, our early childhood clinic. As you all heard a few months ago, Dr. Andreessen came with SWOPE and discussed the early childhood clinic. We're very excited about that, and some news on that is MARC Head Start, which MARC is really that compliant piece that helps fund our Head Start in our early childhood. They've done a lot of great things for us. You know, if you think back to the restrooms they helped to fund in the early childhood, now they are offering to donate $198,000 for our clinic. So we are super excited about that, and I really want to give credit to Dr. Andreessen on that. You know, the work that she's doing, the research that she does, and also just what she's doing with the Head Start in our early childhood has been huge, because they really look to her as an example and a head start for others to come to and want to emulate. And I think that's why they are so willing to help fund some of the things that she's trying to do there. So very exciting. Just wanted to really honor her in that effort as well. So as you see there, Dr. Hux is going to be meeting with some people to make some decisions about how that will look moving forward, but we're excited about that donation. And I like to talk about money, so let's move on to the next money thing. Clay County Children's Fund, we're super excited. We just started our next grant cycle, and the next grant cycle has been approved. The application that we presented was approved in full, so for the next 2 years, you can see the numbers there. Pretty exciting. We're going to end up having getting close to $2 million over the next 2 years from Clay County Children's Fund. And of course that will go to continue to just expand our mental health services, our counseling and therapy for our students. You know, also our staff can benefit from that as well. And just behavior intervention, prevention services, we'll continue to expand those across the district, and we're excited for you know, how we can support our kids in that effort. And then an update on special education. A few months ago, I brought to you an item to approve to add an autism room. And at that time, we hadn't made a decision about whether or not that would be at Lewis or Elkhorn, but we have decided that that room will happen at Elkhorn. And the families involved with that, of course, will be moving to Elkhorn. Most of those kids were in Cornerstone. And so they've been contacted. Everyone is very excited because this will be very strategic programming for those students, and they will really benefit from that. So we're looking forward to that. And what I'd like to say is just a byproduct of that is this will really help with the programming in our functional rooms as well, because that had really become a mix of kids with special services, and splitting those out is really going to benefit both our functional kids and our autistic kids. So we're excited for that as well. And then the last thing on there is the social emotional awareness and training. I also brought to you a few months ago Fuel Ed that we would be using in response to our survey that we administered for all of our teachers and staff, classified and certificated. And we're very excited. We have dates now, so I put those on there so you guys would know. July 27th and 28th. All of our administration will be participating in the Full Educator Collective. And then August 22nd and 23rd, all of our staff will be participating in Empathy School. And so you can see there, the Whole Educator Collective will really help prepare administrators to support our teachers and staff just with that sense of belonging, that well-being, some of the things that were asked on the survey. And then in turn, the Empathy School will help our teachers be able to support our kids after they've gone through that programming. So we're excited for some of the things that we have coming up on the 22-23 school year, and just wanted to share those with you.
I'm excited. Tell Dr. Katie thank you for all her hard work with all of that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely will. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gross. Lisa, do you have those notes? Thanks. All right. Item 2 is appointment of an MSBA delegate or alternate to replace Dr. Hauk on the board. Any volunteers? Okay, Troy volunteered. So don't get sick, Darren.
Amen.
So 2A is what we added to the agenda, and it is it's a discussion to fill the vacancy left by Dr. Hauk. And my entire time on the board, I don't know that we've ever had a vacancy that I can recall that we've had to do this. So it's kind of new for us and muddy waters to go through. So we're posting it tomorrow for the opening. So 7/28. 6/28. Good Lord. And it'll be open until 7/12. So you can go to central office. The forms aren't going to be online, are they?
No.
Okay. You have to go to central office, see Lisa, and she will get you the application to fill out and have it returned by the 12th of July. So this is kind of the timeline that we're looking at. And then we have a workshop July 25th. We'll review the applications on the regular August board meeting, which I believe is the 8th, but don't hold me to that date.
Correct.
We will interview applicants. All has to be done in open session, and vote to appoint a replacement, and then they will be sworn in September board meeting. Does anybody have questions on that?
No, do you want to explain to them like re-election?
Well, this will be to fill the remainder of Dr. Hux's term, which expires in Dr.
Sorry.
I didn't know you were elected. Too many doctors in my. I'm telling you, this month is just having a board meeting this late in the month, and the whole night's been just a mess. So, to fill Dr. Hauk's remaining term, which expires in April of next year. So, whoever is appointed, if they wish to run for re-election or election, I guess, in that point, to fill that position for 3 years, would have to sign up in December when it opens up for registration. So it'll basically be 8 months total, and then you'll have to run for the seat with everybody else if you want to continue. So anybody have questions, thoughts? Okay, that's kind of how we will proceed with it. All right, next up is the fun one. Approval of FY22 end-of-year budget items. Dr. Hux.
Well, this one, I would just ask you to consider approval to complete the payment of FY22 district expenses through June 30. Upon completion, a record of payment will be provided for your review, and then also to consider approval to amend the FY22 budgeted revenues and expenditures to actual amounts effective June 30. Doing this allows district to conduct business through June 30th without requiring an additional board meeting, which is one of the reasons we have this meeting at the time of the month that we do, being the 27th.
All right.
Move to amend the budget as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a first by Troy, second by Kalen. All those in favor? And that passes 6-0.
Pay the bills, Doc.
All right, new budget year.
There we go.
This is the fun one. So before you is a budget document drastically different than what you've probably seen before. This is a 90-page document, and it is developed based on our CSIP goals. If you remember earlier this school year, we took the time to renew our CSIP, and one of the aspects was to create a budget with the components found in the Meritorious Budget Award. And the Meritorious Budget Award design is meant to be for anyone can pick up this document and get a well-rounded understanding of the district before they start looking at the expenses, so that they can have a good understanding. This document has a executive summary that's a standalone document that can be reviewed much more quickly, and then obviously much more in-depth sections. Hopefully you had a chance to spend some time with this document. I tried to get it to you as soon as possible last week. As you know, all this stuff kind of happens right at the end here. So, but rather than go through this 90-page document, I've created a PowerPoint presentation that also goes along with it. I assume it is attached. Is it attached?
Mm-hmm.
For
the second one?
Yes. Should be, it probably shows up. There we go. So this is much more abbreviated, but does strike at all the important aspects, which is the expenditures and revenues. So the first page there, the objectives, we're going to go do a quick funds review. Then we will go through each fund and review the expenditures and revenues, and then we'll come to the budget summary and look at the whole picture. All right, so the 4 funds, you've seen these slides before, but it's always good to remember. The 4 funds are the general fund, the special revenue fund, nicknamed the teachers fund, you have the debt services fund, and the capital projects fund. Some quick descriptors of those funds you can see here. One is non-certificated staff, supplies, purchase services. And this is also where we pay our lease purchases. We take the money from here, move it into Fund 4, and then pay the bill. Fund 2, that's your certificated staff, which is why it's nicknamed the Teachers Fund. Debt services is principal and interest on bonds. And then capital projects are facility improvements, like, building on something or fixing something of some significance. So, in particular, funds 1 and 2, that's your operating budget. When you have those 2 funds together, that's the operating expenses and revenues. Give you an example, that's salary and benefits, which makes up 76% of the operating budget. Go to the next slide there. Also, it's important to pay a lot of attention to the operating budget, because it can't be adjusted easily, because these are committed and reoccurring expenses. And the reason why you have to pay attention is because these expenses naturally grow each year. Pay raises, inflation, added services, all those sorts of things. So that's where you got to spend a lot of your attention. It's not to say that funds 3 and 4 are not important, but to a degree they take care of themselves. As you know, a portion of our tax levy is dedicated to Fund 3, $1.32 essentially, to cover the principal and interest on bonds. And then capital projects, you can either have those or not have those to a large degree. So those funds are easier to manage. All right, with that being said, I'm going to get into the particulars of each fund for FY23. That starts July 1. You see here, expected expenditures are $13.4 million. Expected revenues are $20.4 million, with a difference of about $7 million. Now, it's important to note here, the reason why there's a much higher number in revenue in Fund 1 is because when we receive our taxes, they get dumped into Fund 1. And so I do want to point out that the fund balance is expected to go up by $3 million in FY23. So currently, let's say 6.8 will go up to about 9.8. So let's look at expenditures in particular. Just a reminder, this is your non-certificated staff, supplies, and purchase services. You can see that FY23, the expenditures are similar to previous years, though about $360,000 less than last year. Okay, the next slide is the revenue. You can see here that there's quite a large increase in revenue, and I've noted some of the revenue increases. So there's general increases, some of the smaller sources of revenue, as we have many, have gone up, but you see the railroad and utility, assessed valuation, fully funding transportation, as we talked about. You heard Dr. Gross mention earlier the $1 million we're expecting from Clay County Children's Fund for this year. And then, of course, you may also recall in previous board meeting us moving $1.2 million of ESSER 3 funds. So Fund 2, expenditures, revenue, and the difference there. You'll see $19 million in expenditures, $15 million in revenue, with a negative difference of $4 million. This is normal. As I mentioned earlier, most into Fund 1 due to the way the taxes come in. So this district and most others, we do a transfer to cover the difference and to keep the Fund 2 balance at zero. It's always at zero. So now we go through the expenditures here. Just a reminder that this is the teachers fund. You can see that the FY23 expenditures are similar to last year, though lower. And then if you go to Fund 2 revenue, you can see that the revenue is about we'll call it 1.2 million higher than the previous year. And again, this is due to some increases in things like Prop C, which is our 1% sales tax. Classroom Trust Fund went up, and then Dr. Gross has sought out additional funds within IDEA and Title. Okay, so I mentioned that Fund 1 and 2 together is known as the operating budget. You'll see here that we expect expenditures of about $32.4 million with revenue of $35.4 million with a positive difference of about $3 million. Now I want to describe this budget as balanced with a surplus. And the reason why I don't just call it a surplus budget is because we need to remind ourselves that the $3 million difference is based on one-time funds that we're getting this year we will not get again. So without those funds, this would simply be a balanced budget. But you see here the ESSER 3 funds, the pandemic provisions that we talked about, that's in place for all school districts, and then the transportation funding. So the nice thing is, if those were gone, we would still have a balanced budget. So we're in a nice, safe spot, and this $3 million will go to the reserves. And let's see here, noteworthy differences. However, the changes are nearly net neutral. We noted a 6% on average raise for our staff. I was so pleased that this board and this district was able to accomplish that in a time where there's a significant teacher shortage. At the same time, we also right-sized and through attrition, and then utilizing the staying on track stipend that we've paid in the past. That's also about $1 million. So it's nearly a net neutral. Of course, I got all excited about the transportation funding being $500,000, only to have the rug pulled out under our feet when they said universal free lunch is going away, where students will have to pay for their lunch again. So those will neutralize each other as well. So very interesting how drastically a budget can change each year, and in this case, pretty neutral in its changes on these significant funding aspects.
Dr. Hucks, what are you hearing
Yes.
about going forward on transportation funding? I mean, they can't go back to what it was. I mean, surely, I mean, they may back it off a little. What are you hearing?
Well, of course, that's entirely up to the legislature, it's up to the governor, and to me it makes sense, to fund transportation. We're required, to provide it, and, that's part of a free appropriate public education. I wish Missouri would, put it together as just an expense, and they do have to fund it because it is an expense that we really don't get a choice. I mean, I can't really look at our citizens and say, hey, we're no longer going to do this. And they would probably look at me back and be like, well, fine, we're not coming anymore.
Yeah.
It's not really a choice, and that's why I say it's not really a choice. It's something we have to provide. I hope this causes them, if and when they back it off, not to go back to what it was.
Right. I don't know if people have a sense of how little they were.
Yeah, it was 36%,
Yeah.
something to that effect, was all we were receiving, and we had to cover the rest out of the local funds raised through the citizens' taxes. If they continue to generate high revenue like they are, surplus revenue, I would remind them that this would be a great obligation to continue to fulfill. Before we move on to Fund 3 and 4, does anybody have any questions about Funds 1 and 2? That's the operating budget. That's the only reason I ask. If not, we can discuss and have questions.
On the full pay with a decrease of $500,000 under food services.
Say that again. Yes. So I'll just reiterate. Basically, we had in place during the pandemic what was called universal free lunch and breakfast, and that means it didn't matter what your socioeconomic status was, whether you qualified for free and reduced, you got a free meal. And when you get that, we get reimbursed for those meals. So when you go back to a full pay, where kids will have to bring lunch money, or parents will have to, pay online, that's a lower reimbursement rate than what we get federally. And we expect to go back to what I would describe as pre-pandemic revenue. And if you go to pre-pandemic revenue, that'd be about $500,000 less.
But if they need assistance, they can fill out the form still.
Of course, and that is something we're going to promote multiple times this year. We'll be promoting it during enrollment. We'll also have free and reduced lunch application drives because our free and reduced status causes a domino effect in other funding like title and things like that, or even something that Dr. Thompson's working on right now, what's called an after-school feeding program. Buildings really need to be 50% or higher to qualify for that, but that's a third meal. They can go home with kids who might go home and be hungry when they get home. So there's so many aspects that our funding is based on this free and reduced number. So we're going to be promoting that multiple times throughout the year, all the way until they close it and don't allow us to add. All right, with that being said, we'll go to Fund 3. This is principal and interest in bonds. We expect $3.8 million in expenditures with $3.8 million in revenue. We'll have a nominal increase, and I say nominal, that's a lot of money, but for the overall size, $64,000 increase. As I mentioned to you earlier, you see there that $1.3229 is dedicated to this fund to cover principal and interest. All right, Fund 4, this is your facility improvements. Expenditures are expected to be about $4 million, with revenue about $3 million, with about $1 million difference in the negative. But what I would tell you here is this fund is drastically different each year. It was $16 million last year, right? And that's because we were doing bond projects, right? So that also leads me to remind you that revenues don't come in to this fund automatically. We choose to put them in there. We choose to put them in there through lease purchasing, bonds, or 7% transfer to cover projects. And often that revenue is received in years prior. Like it's literally been years since we received that bond money. So that's why you might see the situation where we have here revenue less than the expenditures, because the revenue's been already previously received and it sits in there like it's a savings account, if you will. A lot of the funds in here there's $1.19 million in remaining bond funds that'll be utilized. For example, we have some funds that will get reimbursed by SEMA, which is the state version of FEMA to pay that FEMA shelter classroom off at Elkhorn. So a lot of these things were meant to be paid for in FY22, but due to the timing of receiving funds, like we will not receive our last SEMA payment until after July 1, so things like that had to be put on hold, and that's why you see a $4 million expenditure there. So it looks much more drastic than it is. This is finishing up some things that have drug on, is really what it is. Any questions? Oh, and by the way, Fund 4 balance, it will go down to 4.3 from 5.4, but as I mentioned, those funds are placed in years in advance. If you remember, we put $23.5 million in there to do all the bond projects. Any questions on Fund 3 or 4 before we go to the summary here? Okay, so the sum and total, we expect expenses to be about $40.2 million. We expect revenue to be $42.2 million with a $2 million positive difference in the overall budget. That's all 4 funds combined. Then if you look in the middle of the page there, you'll see the subtotal 1 and 2. That's our operations budget. And I've mentioned these numbers earlier, but I'll do it again. $32.4 million in expenses, $35.4 million in revenue with a $3 million surplus there. But that was that one-time funds I was telling you about with the pandemic provision, fully funded transportation, and the ESSER funds. So, but the result would be the reserves going up to 30.31%, which is well above our CSIP goal of 20% plus. So with that in mind, I'd answer any questions you might have, or try to anyway. I'll say in short, we're in good shape. Even if some of that attendance doesn't come back in next year, it's covered in here. We're not depending on that pandemic provision that allows us to use that weighted ADA from the 1920 school year. So if that continues to be a slump or slowly come back, it's not going to be a drop off a cliff for us. We'll still be able to manage.
And we haven't heard any more from Job Corps, have we?
No new updates. I'm hearing they're anticipated to be open for next year. I would hope that we can get back to servicing the number of kids through that program that need public education services. Again, if that would be icing on the cake, I guess you could call it. So, but we're in good shape either way with this budget. Any other questions? I will tell you, these numbers are old because today is almost over, so this will be immediately revised July 1 with the final numbers from FY22. We'll tell you FY22, the difference in the operating budget does look like it's going to drop down from 1.7 to 1.5, so that's better. And instead of $16 million in capital expenditures, it's closer to the $13 million, which is why you see a larger number here in FY23. So things are turning out just fine, it appears. So,
being that we're up to 30% in reserves, didn't we talk about maintaining that where it obviously continues to go higher and higher for us right now?
So if you look at of course it's not in the presentation I just gave you, but if you do look in the executive summary or the budget document itself, I do forecast out several years, and based on that forecast, you have to remember that $3 million surplus, we won't get that again next year. So, but if we don't make any other significant changes, it looks like we'll hover around in between 30 to 35% balances over the next 3 or 4 years.
Are we still thinking of some of that as being piggy banked towards the next elementary school? Right.
So that's a great question. I've spent a lot of time this afternoon developing our work session program, and where we're going to talk about the next phase of construction, what the scope will be, what the timeline will be, and what the funding sources will be. And I do note there's a potential to utilize the reserves to do that. And we'll decide how much of that we think we can do. Obviously, if you do utilize those reserves in capital, you know, what I say, there's $4 million in capital. That'll slowly dwindle down, obviously, because we're not going to replenish it. But you do have the option of doing like we did last year and moving some levy over to push funds from 1 to 4. But again, that would drop this 30% back down closer to the 20. And we could, it just depends on the year we decide to go. Anywhere from 6 to 9 million could potentially be used, but you'd probably be back down to your 20% reserves if you did that. So that's a detailed discussion that I'm happy for us to go through in July. So, but that's a great question. Thanks.
I knew we had mentioned it before, talked about it. I just want to make sure that, you know, it continued to go up like that. So we're looking at all options.
Right. It's at some point, you know, I mean, we're not a bank. You want to be healthy.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. We're not, I mean, other than
Healthy,
for
but not
bonding,
wealthy.
there's really not an
Yeah.
advantage to having a 35%
Exactly.
revenue surplus, you know, a
Agreed.
revenue reserve, you know.
Agreed. So, any other questions? Well, I appreciate your time. It's been fun to finally create my own budget for this school district, so I'm very excited about that. Thank you.
Thank you for doing it.
Yep. All right, this time I entertain a motion to adopt the 23 budget.
So moved.
First by Kayla, second by Rick. Questions, concerns, or comments? Good work.
Thank you, thank you.
All those in, go ahead.
Sorry, I will be submitting this budget to International ASBO, hoping to get that meritorious budget award. So there's only, I want to say 8 districts in the state of Missouri that do that, have one. So hopefully we'll be the 9th.
All right, hearing no further comments, questions, or concerns. All those in favor? That passes 6-0. All right, that brings us to the conclusion. This time I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
First by Troy, second by Kalen. All those in favor? Travel safe. Have a good night. 6-0. It's good to see you, Dr. Gross.
Yes.
Lisa, do you want me to leave these down here?
Have a good summer.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
May see you in 2 weeks, may not. Depends on.